Leading Ideas Talks podcast is brought to you by the Lewis Center for Church Leadership of Wesley Theological Seminary in Washington, D.C. Subscribe free to our weekly e-newsletter, Leading Ideas, at churchleadership.com/leadingideas. Leading Ideas Talks is also brought to you by Healing Fractured Communities, a book written by alumni of the Lewis Center Community Leadership Fellows Program. Each chapter paints a picture of the work of healing fractures like racism, educational inequality, and poverty. Each chapter also includes takeaways to inspire healing in your community, plus questions for reflection. All proceeds support the Dr. Lovett H. Weems Jr. Scholarship Fund. Learn more and order now at churchleadership.com/books. And remember to stay up to date with the latest church leadership strategies and information. Please like and subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to get updates for new videos. In a cultural moment marked by deep division and difficult conversations, this episode steps into one of the most complex and emotionally charged topics shaping faith communities across the United States: Christian nationalism. Host Karen Stewart invites listeners not to run away from the discomfort, but to lean in with curiosity, compassion, and a desire for understanding. Guests Caleb Campbell, author of Disarming Leviathan, and Rachel Williams explore not just what Christian nationalism is, but who it impacts and how we can engage with our neighbors.
Good morning. I am Karen Stewart, and this is the Leading Ideas podcast. Today, we are going to be talking about Christian nationalism. All right, don't turn us off. I know it's a lot, but we're not talking about it just in terms of what it is. We're going to talk about it in terms of who they are, and not just that, but what you can do to have conversations with them. Many of us discovered new things about our family, our friends, and our neighbors. So instead of turning them off, why not be in conversation with them? This came to the forefront for me because as I was on a flight attendant tapped me on the shoulder and asked me if I was a pastor. I said I was. And her response, with tears in her eyes because she had been watching the news, was, "How do you give people hope in these times?" I had another colleague talk about how her pastor is a person of color, and she just needed to know how to better assist him. That's our goal today, to really unpack what it all is and how we can be who God has called us to be in these tumultuous times. What's not lost on me is you are hearing this today, smack dab in the middle of us celebrating Jesus riding in on a donkey for peace and us getting ready to celebrate Resurrection Sunday. And today is April Fool's Day. I think we wake up every day thinking, have I woke up in an alternate universe? The irony is not lost on me. So we've got some great folks that I want to introduce you today to help us unpack and tackle this topic. First is Rachel Williams. Rachel Williams is the budget manager right here in the Lewis Center, but she is also a PhD student at American University, and she is studying justice, law, criminology, and security. Also with us today is Caleb Campbell. Caleb Campbell is the pastor of Desert Springs Bible Church in Phoenix, Arizona, and he is the author of Disarming Leviathan, Loving Your Christian Nationalist Neighbor. Now, he's also a Reformed skinhead and a Cowboys fan. Again, don't turn off the podcast because you've heard that. Welcome, Caleb and Rachel. What a blessing it is to have both of you with me today.
Thank you.
Thank you, Karen.
So let's just start at Rachel, from an academic perspective, what is Christian nationalism?
So Christian nationalism is many things, but I think the quickest way to explain Christian nationalism is it is the belief that America is God's chosen nation and must be defended as such only by or mainly by Christians. So Christians should be the ones in leadership. Christianity as a religion should have a special favored position over other religions in the United States. So specifically, we're talking about the U.S. context. I should also say that.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm curious as well. I probably should have started here. For both you, Rachel, and you, Caleb, what got you interested in this topic? We'll start with you, Rachel, and then we'll move to you, Caleb. What got you interested in this?
So, what got me interested in Christian nationalism goes back, what is that now? Back to 2013. I was an undergraduate student learning about terrorism and other types of political violence that are going on, and I was surprised at in the explanation of terrorism or political violence. Mainly, the only religion that would come up is Islam. And I was wondering if there was other types of political violence done by Christians or in the name of Christianity. And I found it, unfortunately. I learned about different abortion clinic bombings that had happened in the United States in the past, as well as going further back to the acts of the Ku Klux Klan as well. So that was kind of what got me into this area of interest and continuing to learn about the political violence that had been done in the name of Christianity and the different ways that has manifested in the United States in particular.
Thank you. Thank you. Caleb, what about you?
Yeah, I became the lead pastor at Desert Springs in 2015, right in the middle of the primary season, and did not really see any of this stuff coming. But we had such division in the congregation from 16 to 20. I was trying to figure out why so many people were angry about talking about immigration or racial reconciliation, things of that nature. And by the time that January 6, 2021 came around, right after that, about 80% of our congregation that was there in 2016 had left by the beginning of 2021. And many of them left loud and accused me of, being demon possessed or being a secret communist or being atheist.
Wow.
Because the evidence was we had obeyed government regulations related to COVID-19, because we had continued, as we had been doing decades prior, talking about caring for immigrants and refugees. We had continued, as we had done decades prior, talking about racial reconciliation. That really got a lot of pushback after Ahmaud Arbery and Breonna Taylor and George Floyd were murdered. And I was struck by the vibe shift in the congregation that I met the Lord in this congregation, 25 years ago. So I felt like I knew where we were all at. And what 16 to 20, that season, unveiled for me was that there was an awful lot of not only division within the congregation, but also a commitment to using the methods of this world to garner power and security, which was striking me because I thought we were doing the Jesus thing. And January 6th happens. I hear the word Christian nationalism. I'm sure I've heard it before, but that's the time I remember me personally being like, wait, this is a thing. And what understanding the American Christian nationalist movement helped me see was that the reason that people were upset at me and yelling and angry and yelling at each other were not disparate bits. It was an overall movement. There was something bigger happening than just one person over here being angry about this thing and one person over here being angry about this thing, but it was all connected. And I'm 3 miles down the street from where Turning Point USA, which Charlie Kirk founded that organization years ago. I'm about 3 miles down the road from where they host monthly events, Freedom Nights, at a mega church. And they were doing this in 2021. And people that I was pastoring at the time were handing me flyers in the lobby to these events saying, there's a revival happening, Pastor Caleb. And I was so struck by the fact that what I looked at the flyer and I thought, oh, this is a rally. right? A political
Mhm.
rally.
Yeah,
But
yeah.
they said revival.
Wow.
And so me and one of our elders at the church, we went, and I was extremely distraught and disturbed by what I saw, because most rallies that are at churches, the church goes out of their way to say, this is a public civic event. Thank you to the community. Maybe they'll pray, but by no means have I ever seen a political rally at a church pretend to be church. It might be hosted in a building, but this was church. They did 3 of the worship songs we do at our church. They did an altar call. They took an offering. And then at the time, the leader of the organization, Charlie Kirk, got up and did a sermon. I mean, he preached. The word of God says, and he's got a Bible in hand. And I watched as he was making explicit political points about taking over America, getting them out, the enemy, and talking about gun rights and school choice, things like this, making direct appeals to scripture. And what was striking to me is everyone in the room is raising their hands saying amen and hallelujah. And so for me, I was so disturbed by the syncretism, the merging together of a certain way of being political in America with the way of Jesus, that Christian nationalism as a movement became much more helpful to me to understand what was going on in the people that I was pastoring.
Thank you. Thank you. It makes me, Caleb, you are making reference to when you started pastoring and when Christian nationalism kind of hit your radar. But I'm curious as to how we got here. Because for me, as a woman of color, the things that I see in Christian nationalism isn't new to me, but I'm hearing from others that it is new to them. Can you, Rachel, kind of help us figure out or better understand how we got here where we are today as a nation?
Oh, that's a big question, Karen, but I will do my best. In many ways, there this has always been part of the United States and what the United States has been as a country to some extent, unfortunately. Going back to the 1800s, this connection between Christianity and the power of the state, of the power of the government, as a way of both of those being interlinked and as a way to continue to consolidate power for particular groups of people. And so that's been around for a while. I think specifically for what we're currently experiencing in the United States can, to some extent, start at the point of the 1960s, kind of the reaction to the civil rights movement and different social and societal changes that were happening at that time, and then the reaction to those societal changes. So for our current situation, that I think that is a typical and makes sense common point of starting point to moving forward, because that then includes the creation of the moral majority and the other kind of processes that came from the moral majority, a lot of the different organizations and leaders that then continued on to evolve and grow into the different individuals and organizations that Christian nationalism is uh, uh, pushed through today. So that would be like their main starting point, I would say, for that. And that then has continued on through different processes of talking about abortion and other political concerns that people have, and then connecting those directly and mainly with Christianity. So all of those movements have brought us to this point in different ways. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you. You use two words, and I don't know if you use them interchangeably, but you use the term nation and state. And Caleb, as I was reading your book, you made a real distinction between the nation and the state. Can you unpack that a little bit more for us?
So in the Bible, we see the word ethnos, or Hebrew ger, often translated as nation, and it means people group. It doesn't mean the legal entity that has a border and taxes and an army. That's the state or the government. So in America, we say one nation under God, indivisible, and all that kind of stuff. But that's not actually true. We are many nations. So thinking about America, we are many different people groups. For instance, we have people groups like Creole or Cajun, and that's a people group, right? But they are also American. They're part of the country and the state known as America. So I'm in the Southwest. I'm Sonoran, born and bred. And the food and the culture and the music, I am of a people group. I have very little to do with Maine or Rhode Island. Like, they talk of lobster and things of this nature. I'm not sure what that is. And it's not that we're all Americans, but I recognize that the thing that binds me together with those different people groups is with those different nations is that we are all part of one country that's bound together not by common ancestry, not by common ethnicity, not by common king, but by an idea. And so we are nations in a state. And the reason why I think that's important is because we're using the term Christian nationalism. And when you put a modifier in front of the word nationalist or nationalism, you're answering the question, who gets to be in charge of the state? Which nation, which people group gets to be in charge of the state? And so there's like Irish nationalism, there's Hindu nationalism. And in America, we're using the term Christian nationalism to talk about Christianity as a tribe, a people group. Those are the people who get to be in charge of the state.
Thank you for that distinction. I want you to also draw another distinction that you talk about in your book, and that is between a patriot and a nationalist, I believe is the distinction that you make. Can you help us better understand that as well? I think sometimes we have to get our terms correct to make sure that we're all talking about the same thing. And it just seems like, all of it is in this melting pot, and it's just becoming, these words are becoming very interchangeable. And what I might think about what patriotism is, because I feel as though I can't be a patriot because now this term Christian nationalism has become so prominent that even leaving the country saying that I'm an American draws ire around the world. So help us to make a distinction between those two terms as well.
Patriotism is about love. Nationalism is about power. So C.S. Lewis talks about this in his book, The Four Loves, that healthy patriotism is the word that we call family love, the love I have for my family, extended out to the broader nation or people group to whom I belong. And so it's the love for the places, the food, the music, the people, the way of being in the world. I experience a phenomenon when I travel for more than a couple of weeks and I'm in a strange country. I experience what we sometimes refer to as homesickness, where I am not at rest when I'm in places that are strange to me. They talk different. The culture is different. I always have to be on and aware. And moreover, there's a lot about America that's familiar to me that I love and adore and celebrate. And so patriotism is all that stuff kind of wrapped up together. And true love is self-sacrificial. So acts of patriotic acts are usually in service of others out of love for the people. So, it's my patriotic duty would be something that we might say. It's an act of service for the larger group. Nationalism can leverage patriotism, and often does, but nationalism says, hey, this people group that you love, or this group thing that you love, you get to be in charge and dominate over others. So it's about who gets to be in charge. So for instance, I could say that, as an Arizonan, I have a patriotic love for Arizona, but to say Arizona should now be in charge of the entire country, and in fact, the world, would be more of a nationalistic argument, talking about who gets to have control, who gets to have power, who gets to be supreme. And so when we're talking about Christian nationalism, we're talking about power, who gets to be in charge. And I might just make a quick note too. People who argue for Christian nationalism don't actually mean it. And here's what I mean. Christianity is a very broad movement. They usually mean a honed expression of Christianity that they approve of. So it's usually a kind of like denominational nationalism. I would just notice that no modern American Christian nationalist is arguing that Mennonites should be in charge of the Department of War because they're pacifists. So we don't mean that kind of Christian. And so while we're using the term Christian nationalism, we're in actual practice, people usually mean a subset of ideas or ideals and political postures that they bundle together to call Christian.
Thank you. Thank you. So as a Christian, I can be comfortable based on what your definitions saying that I'm a patriot, because you can be a Christian and a patriot without contradiction.
I believe so.
I hear some hesitation.
Just because the term gets misused sometimes.
Yeah.
I think that healthy patriotism is, and I agree with Lewis in this, that it is the love that I have for my family extended out. And I think that that's good. Where it becomes malformed is when it now seeks to dominate over others.
I see. Thank you. Thank you for that. Rachel, I want to kind of swing back to something, because it seems as though Christian nationalism has been around a long time. As you were talking about the definition and how it has manifested itself in American culture and society, it seems as though it has been empowered to raise its ugly head a little differently. You mentioned the KKK, you mentioned, it used to be very undercover. And we may not have known who felt the way they felt. We knew that there was this undercurrent within the country, but we didn't necessarily know who. Now it seems very in your face as to who it is. And I became aware of a term. I knew there was a date. Several years ago, I became aware that as people were talking about the makeup of America, that they started talking about a term that I do not like, but I'm going to use it here, which is that people of color are going to become the majority minority, and they would stick a date on it. I mean, they had it down to, in this particular year, this is going to happen. Again, I do not like the term majority minority, because I don't like the term minority. I think it's very degrading to people of color. So just take a note there. But there's a term, and it is called the Great Replacement. And can you unpack that a little? And is that, or does that have some bearings into how we find ourselves where we are today?
Yeah, so the Great Replacement, that phrase is connected to the Great Replacement theory. The Great Replacement theory, as you described, there is a particular date where the demographics are going to change in the United States of America. And that the Great Replacement theory takes that to the point of that is a conscious effort being done by particular people for particular purposes in order to take away power from others. So it's almost like there's a concerted effort in a way behind that. As one way of looking at it. Another way is like, this is something that's going to happen and we need to stop it from happening because everything's going to change in a way that we will not have a place in it anymore. Those could be two different ways of a response to that type of information. And so with that, how that plays into everything that we're talking about is yes, Christian nationalism is about Christians being in the place of power and so on. But in a lot of ways, what really we're talking about is white Christian nationalism. So it's so how Christian nationalism plays out in the United States, there's a racial component to it as well, that there is a particular way of Christianity and a particular way of who is being considered like it's not just true American is not just being a Christian, but also a white Christian in particular. So those are also pieces of what we're talking about when we're talking about Christian nationalism, and that's how those two things come together in what is happening right now. There's this, once again, it's a type of social change that's occurring, and people are responding in through a cognitive dissonance that is leading to, we need to regain power, or to take back, or to take more power to stop this from happening.
I'm curious as a follow up to that, because I hear you saying that Christian nationalism is really white, a white Christian nationalism. Is it also gender based? So is it more men than it is women? I know I was listening to Ed Stetzer as he was talking about the demographics of the church. And this was last year. He did some data on the demographics of the church, and he made two assertions that I had not heard before. One was that women and girls were starting to leave the church, as well as that there is a rise of boys or men in the church. And I've often wondered, is could that potentially be tied to the changes in the climate that we see happening with Christian nationalism and the people that it has a tendency to reach more often?
Yeah, so I have also seen those articles, and I've heard that data, and it is right. There's actually a bit of a question to it. Is Are young men and boys more joining the church, or is it more women and girls are more leaving the church? Like, what is actually making the changes? And to some extent, I think the data still needs to be collected as to how far this change, or how pronounced this change is going to be in the coming years. But in the way that that's connected, in one way, there's always been like a connection between masculinity, religion, and the well-being of the state. That's kind of been a through line in a lot of different ways in the United States. And so part of it is the way of mm, men being in having particular positions of power. That is how we continue to keep our power, and to keep like a balance and order that that will continue to keep the United States in the good graces of God, but also as a successful nation. So that's kind of a very broad a broad overview of where those connections come into play. And then as the focus becomes more of a particular power for men and less power for women, more women and girls would then less want to be at church. That would be kind of the narrative at play with kind of these recent statistics that we've been seeing. And that, so some ways, like, you can connect a Christian supremacy to a male supremacy at the same time.
Caleb, I want to follow up with you because I know you talk about the great replacement in your book as well. So tell me what your comments are and how you see the great replacement as playing into where we find ourselves with Christian nationalism today.
Yeah, I see that anxiety about pluralism is rampant in this movement. The communities in America are changing. As was said earlier, this side of the 1960s, the pluralism in America has become exponentially more vibrant, and that creates anxiety in folks. For instance, Aunt Betty's been going to the same grocery store for 50 years. She walks right down the street. She gets her bread, her milk, her eggs. She has a chat with the clerk. It's lovely. But just the other day, she was standing in line, and you won't believe this. The clerk was talking a different language to the person in front of Betty. And for that fleeting moment, she wondered, am I going to have to learn a new language to go to my grocery store? am I welcome here? Is this, this strangeness is happening in a place that I find familiar? Now, that anxiety can be handled in healthy ways and unhealthy ways, but the change is real. And many folks who are purveyors of American Christian nationalism will latch on to that real change and that very real anxiety, and they'll add gasoline to the fire, so to speak, saying, "That's right, Betty, they are coming to take over, and you won't be welcome in your home anymore. They're going to replace you." And so what do we do? I mean, what do we do if our home and safety are under threat? You reach for the sword. And so a buddy of mine, Ryan, who studied the rise of fascism in Germany, made a statement that I think is true here. He says authoritarianism grows in the seedbed of anxiety about pluralism. And as the community changes, it makes us feel unsettled sometimes. And so authoritarian leaders swoop right in and make promises to keep that from happening, to solve the anxiety. And as a pastor, my invitation for folks is, regardless of the source of your anxiety, we don't look to leaders with swords to solve that anxiety. We look to the King of Kings, who takes on the cross and who dwells with us and promises to never leave us or forsake us. And so the commitment that many folks have to American Christian nationalism is a misplaced trust that the movement will give them safety, belonging, and purpose as they feel either unwelcome or unsafe in their own communities.
Well, as you can see, that was a great conversation, but we didn't get through it all in one setting. So this is part 1, and our next podcast will be part 2. We'll continue the conversation about Christian nationalism and how you can start having conversations across the table with your family and friends. See you next time.
Thanks for joining us for Leading Ideas Talks. Please like and subscribe to this channel and click the bell icon to get updates for new videos.